In this study, I'm borrowing from a few people. First of all, the groove is basically Free, from the band Free. It's called Walk in My Shadow, one of my favorite tunes. And I'm stealing some vibrato and some ideas from a few guys. One is Paul Kossoff, who is a guitar player for Free. I know Joe Bonamassa covers this song quite a bit. The guitar solo is a mixture of some of the stuff that Paul Kossoff plays and Eric Clapton's solo from Strange Brew, which is also the same as Albert King's solo from Crosscut Saw that he borrowed it from. So I've learned a lot from these guys put together, so I kind of put together a little bit of a version of the whole thing. Now, we're really just going to use pentatonic scale once again. These are just whole step and half step bends and tweaked thirds, but in a little bit more of a full-on rock and roll guitar solo. Okay, so the first lick. Okay, so that first bend, well, I have G, B flat, G minor pentatonic, G, B flat, C, and I'm kind of bending to nowhere. And it's got a bending up. I do as an overbend, kind of like your ear just it kind of imagines it keeps going, right? So I just use my ears on that, and I just stop at the apex of the bend with my right hand. Okay, now. Okay, so now I'm going to start with here. Now this is a really classic blues lick. G, D, sorry, C to D bend. Okay, now that little bend. So those are two bends. I'm not releasing them. So as when I get to the apex, which is going to be the whole step bend, notice my pick comes down and stops everything. So it's coming from my pick, the stopping of the bend. And I release the bend, and as I mute with my pick, I release the bend. So that's a great exercise to work on. Okay, so we got. Okay, so since to me bends and vibrato fall in the same category, here I'm using my second finger to get the vibrato. As we talked about in the intro, my thumb is over the top. I'm really locked in, and I'm pulling the string downwards in this case. And it's really important to make sure that the string comes back to its resting position. So I look at vibrato, as I've mentioned before, as kind of like a Zen approach. I'm pulling on a string, and I'm letting it go back to resting. So it's just back and up and down. I'm not pulling the string back to being in tune. I'm just letting it fall back into place. So it's pull, release, pull, release, pull, release. I find if you think about and try to bring it back into position, you're going to keep it a little sharp. And good vibrato, bad, right? That note was sharp. And one way you can visually tell is just look at the string. Does it go slack or straight in between the bent part of the vibrato? Okay, so. Okay, there. First finger bend, which is awesome. So the first finger bend, it requires a lot of hand strength to get used to this one. And I'm bending up with the first finger, and I'm kind of doing a half step bend, almost. That tweaked flat third once again, and I just do it till it sounds right. A little more gain here. Right? Then. So it's variation on the same lick. So first part. Same kind of lick again with the bend. Now I'm going to bend the C to D, but vibrato. And there, I'm going for the big, big vibrato. This takes a lot of practice. So, but the intensity it gives you, as opposed to going, that's cool, but. So. It's almost like a whole step. Well, like a half step, but that's still pretty big on vibrato. Okay, so that's something to really work on those notes. So that, once again, my thumb is over the top of the neck. I'm pushing up. It's almost like I'm turning a jar, like a lid on a jar or a doorknob. It's all coming from my forearm. The bend is coming from my forearm. The vibrato, once again, is like a mini bend. So I'm holding that bend up, and I just release it enough and then bring it back up to pitch. It's, once again, as discussed in the beginning, it's urgent, absolutely, that the bend comes from your wrist, not your fingers. I mean, some people will say that. I gave myself hand problems from doing that wrong, okay? So your wrist is much stronger than your fingers, right? So lock the fingers, jamming them up against the fret, right up on the fret, pushing into the fret kind of as the end marker. I'm bending with 2 fingers. I'm never bending with 1 finger except for the first finger bend. And I'm reinforcing it. That gives me the opportunity, you know, yeah, to get those really big bends, because it's brute force, really. And that's something like a Paul Kossoff kind of thing from Free. He's got that big vibrato. It's pretty intense. Okay, so that's the first part. Then I went down here, G minor pentatonic. That bend. Now, one thing I've did a few times, I did a rake. I should talk about that. That's where I'm muting the strings and raking into them. And I'm muting with my heel of my hand, and I go into those notes. And it really, what it does is it's like a punch in the face for me. It's like a really cool articulation, makes the note sound stronger, as opposed to going, that's cool, but gives a little bit more of a punch. So I go down here to the G minor pentatonic scale. And I bend the F to the G. And if you notice the bend, man, thumbs over the top of the neck, first finger's coming up to mute the other strings. All right, that's really important. The bend is with my pinky, but it's not really with my pinky. It's with my pinky, second finger, and third finger jammed up all in one spot. If I spread the fingers out like this, all the energy gets dissipated. I want that energy right there so I can push against that fret and get all that force behind it. Right, I want that big vibrato. So you can use your third finger. Either one. Like I said, I'm actually bending with my pinky, or I may not if I use my third finger, but I'm not actually just using my pinky. All right, so we've got that lick there. Great rock and roll lick. So it's G, F, pull off to D. Slight bend on the D. Right, so. Then. So I did double stop down here, barring with my third finger on the C and the E. Release that bend. Now the double stop, I'm not really bending as we saw in the minor blues. I'm not really bending anything specifically. It's kind of like a half step on my third finger, and just by catching in the second finger, it doesn't really bend that much. It just gives it a cool rub. Then I go to my first finger, and I bend that up slowly towards the neck, that tweak the flat third, not quite making the natural third. Right? And I stop it. Now here's one that I stole from Clapton. Okay, that is from Strange Brew, and what was so cool about that, first of all, it's awesome. The notes, still thinking G minor pentatonic, G, B flat to C. Then I'm going to bend up to the C and fret the C. Okay, so that's a tricky one. So I'm playing the B flat, G, bend the B flat to the C, then fret the C. Then here's the bend from B flat to C, and then the big vibrato, and you extend the bend. And if you notice, like, when you listen back, I vibratoed some, and I didn't vibrato all of them. So it's kind of, it makes it sound different. It's those little nuances that is where all the magic is. I mean, anybody who's halfway decent on a guitar can bend a string, but this idea of right, different emotion altogether. So what I also love about that lick, and a little kind of theoretical thing, that's on our 5 chord. I'm sorry, we're in G, so our 5 chord, let me get this right, would be the D chord, right? Down to the C chord, back to the 1. So we're bending this B flat to the C, so really we're hearing a C note. That C note in itself on the G chord isn't very good. It's kind of you can't use that note on a G chord, and it sounds wrong. But my 5 chord is D7. It's a beautiful note on D7. It's the root of the C chord. So I thought it was the first time, was one of those eye-opening moments for me when I learned that solo, and like, man, he's using that note, and he's outlining the 4 and the 5 chord using the C note, which is not a good note. It's the 4th of the scale, which isn't a great note on the root. So, right, that's such a great use of that note. Then at the end, I did a little double stop again, and ended up straight off on a blues scale. So, there you go. Like I said, check out Eric Clapton's solo on Strange Brew, Paul Kossoff's solo on Walk in My Shadow, and check out what Joe Bonamassa does on this tune too, because he loves those guys as much as I do, and you can tell how he borrowed a lot from those guys as well.